Ray Bradbury was born in Waukegan, Illinois on August 22, 1920. He was the third son of Leonard Bradbury and Esther Moberg. Bradbury's greatest achievements happened behind a typewriter. In 1934, Ray and his family moved to Los Angeles, where Ray got his first pay as a writer for contributing a joke to the Burns and Allen show. Bradbury wrote The Martian Chronicles in 1950. The book describes man's attempt to colonize Mars. The Martian Chronicles established Bradbury's reputation as a leading science fiction writer. Bradbury still writes short stories today and gives occasional lectures at an age most men would have retired to their graves.
The Martian Chronicles begins with the second expedition arriving to Mars, only to find that the Martians there believe the captain of the expedition is insane and telepathically imaging everything from the rocket to the crew. Instead of being welcomed to Mars for accomplishing the feat of traveling there, the captain and crew are shot because the Martians believe that the extent of their madness is incurable. The third expedition comes to Mars a few years later, who are joyfully surprised to find their dead relatives living there in a familiar town. However, the family members were actually telepathic images created by the Martians to lure the humans into their death trap. The next rocket traveled to Mars to find a dead planet. Almost every Martian had become infected with the chickenpox, and the normally harmless disease proved deadly for them. With all of the Martians dead, rockets started blasting off to Mars, bringing settlers. One man, Benjamin Driscoll, decided to plant trees across the red planet to make it more inhabitable by himself and his fellow humans. After the primary settlers came to Mars, the black people living in the South followed them, searching for a better life. Meanwhile, a law on Earth was passed that outlawed fiction, and all fictional pieces of literature were burned. As a tribute to the lost art of fiction, Mr. Stendhal went up to Mars to build the House of Usher, a haunted mansion complete with witches, dwarves, and harlequins. However, his success was short-lived because the Moral Climate Government Enforcement Team came, and the mansion was destroyed the next day. Back on Earth, a nuclear war broke out, and the settlers from Mars came back to their home planet to fight. Only a couple of families escaped the terrible war by blasting off to Mars in their personal rockets. On the red planet, the two families hope to slowly rebuild the human race. Next, Randy will talk about how the themes of colonization, the progress of technology, and man's greed are integrated into Ray Bradbury's novel.
The theme of the book is hard to place, as it is a collection of many different stories and therefore has many themes and plots. However, there are several themes that reoccur throughout Bradbury's book. For instance, progress, man's greed, and colonization. These themes pop up several times throughout the course of the book and are displayed in different stories in different ways. For example, in the first few stories in the novel, expeditions from Earth land on Mars and attempt to colonize the planet. The first two expeditions failed and were killed by the Martians. After the Martians were killed off by chickenpox, the humans quickly took over Earth and colonized it. In the short story, The Settlers, many men left Earth and flew to Mars in search of work. 3 years later in the story, Interim, Bradbury tells of how people flew in thousands of lumber feet of Mars to build the new cities. They gave them names such as Spender Hill and Nathaniel Yorktown after the men who first came to Mars. This not only shows man's greed and possessivism, but it also shows human ingenuity and respect for forebearers. This ingenuity and respect can also be seen in a later short story, Usher 2. As Luke explained, fiction had been outlawed on Earth, and the main character of this story, Mr. Stendhal, had flown to Mars to rebuild a house based on great works of fiction. He recreated horrific scenes from the books of writers such as Edgar Allan Poe. His horror house, in turn, killed off those men and women responsible for outlawing such books. I believe it was Bradbury's intention to create a sense of irony that the one thing they were trying to get rid of came back to kill them. I think Bradbury was also trying to say that ideas are hard to snuff out completely, as is the human spirit. This theme is also repeated in many of the stories after the nuclear war had started on Earth. As the majority of humans on Mars returned to Earth to fight in the wars, some inevitably stayed. As Earth was destroyed by a global war, a few people managed to escape to Mars or stayed there. These few remaining humans were all that were left after the war, and in the last story of the book, The Million-Year Picnic, it was evident that these humans were not snuffed out but became the new generation of Martians. I think this counteracts the greed of humans seen in several stories throughout the book. Perhaps the best example can be found in the story The Off-Season. In this story, Sam Parkhill, one of the first men to set foot on Mars with the fourth expedition, set up a hot dog stand on Mars and hoped that the next flood of workers from Earth would make him rich. He was given thousands of square miles of land by the Martians and was genuinely excited to be able to use it for his own purposes. However, instead of getting rich off of potential customers, he was horrified when he witnessed the first bombs fall on Earth. His greed led to dismay as he realized he could not get any customers, and that his world was being destroyed. Bradbury's intentions are unclear as there is not one main theme throughout the book. However, one predominant theme is progression. As the story progresses, you see the timeline of humans on Mars, from being the outsiders who took over a planet to the last members of a dying race trying to
I
rebuild
thought
it.
the book groups were a great idea for us to be able to discuss books using the internet. In this new age, the internet is a valuable part of our lifestyle, and being able to use it in a school setting is just wonderful. The Martian Chronicles is a classic because the themes of the book are so relevant in a modern day time. Greed, progression, and colonization are still issues in the modern world and will be in the future. As a whole, I thought the novel was very interesting and fun to read. I would definitely recommend this novel to someone who likes science fiction books.